All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We are continuing our podcast series on success through subtraction. Most of our conversations revolve around what we can introduce into our life to further ourselves in personal, professional success. But in this series, we want to talk about things that we might want to omit from our lives. Things that in the way of our time and how it's used. Is it inefficient? What our approach is to using our time effectively, the relationships that we have in our lives, how they're potentially adversely affecting it or not. And then we're also going to inject money today as well. We kind of threw that in here at the last minute. So excited to see how that one goes. But with that, I'll introduce you to Dr. Hall. Dr. Hall is a business psychologist and executive coach, public speaker, a multi-time author, and we are always, as always, excited to have him on the show to talk about these subjects to help introduce thought into how we can be more successful, happier, and more productive lives. So thanks for joining us today, Dr. Hall.
Oh, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Jared.
I think this concept would be an interesting one because it seems like something we could just hit on, immediately. Like, should we remove some of this stuff?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, let's get to it after we do a couple housekeeping items here real quick. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also known as MHC Realty. Our sponsor for today is the Perfect Real Estate Business. We've been developing it over the last couple of decades now, in large part with our relationship with Dr. Hall, introducing business coaching, life coaching, mentoring and training, and then the other things that you would expect in the real estate business. If you have any questions or would like to know more, please feel free to reach out to us. Other than that, we'll bring Dr. Hall back on and see what your thoughts are on the degree of success that you've seen successful people look at and analyze things that they could remove from their lives. Do you focus on that quite a bit? And if so, kind of how's that been received?
It really depends on the person. I think a book that's been very influential in my thinking is one by Greg McKeown called Essentialism. Mm-hmm. And the mantra in that is less but better. Hmm. And so it isn't about having 11,000 things. It's about having one really spectacular thing and enjoying that thing. So his, and it's not just about things, but it's about time. It's about relationships. And you can have 10,000 relationships. You can have 10,000 anythings, but you can only really enjoy one of them at a time. And so where do you really get the payoff for whatever you're spending your time or your relationships in? And the focus is of having fewer but higher quality things, possessions, and relationships.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to, I had the time as the first one, but I like the idea of talking about relationships because, time is finite. And if we're spreading our time too thin, are the people in our lives that deserve, that we want to have a good relationship with and that deserve our time. Now, all of a sudden, if you're slicing that up, does your significant other, do your kids, do your team members, do they feel like they're getting the time that makes them feel good about the relationship?
Yeah. So one of the principles that guided my thinking when my children were little was it isn't quality time. For children, quantity time is quality time. And people go, oh, I can only spend an hour a week with my kid, but so we're really going to make it matter. Well, kids need to be with you when you're not really doing anything and kind of being bored. That's when you have these important conversations, they bubble up when you're not so urgent about everything. So I think the same is true with adults, that we have 168 hours in a week. A third of that is spent sleeping. Approximately a third of that is spent at work, and you can have relationships at work. So a third of your life, and approximately half of your waking life, your conscious life, is your free time. The other half is your work. So how are you spending that? You've got a maximum of 168 hours in a week. Approximately a third of that is, what's that? About 50 hours. Mm-hmm. So you've got 50 hours a week. Yeah, no, a little bit more than that. 50 odd hours of conscious time. How are you spending it? And are you spending it with the most important people? Unlike money, which is not a zero-sum game, there is essentially the potential for an infinite supply of money. But in terms of time, there's not an infinite supply of time. Powerful. So spending our time is far more important than spending our money. And in my thinking, you can tell a person's by priorities by their calendar and their cash. How do they spend their time? How do
they spending their money?
Where they spend their time, where they spend their money. So in line with the book Essentialism, it isn't about having 800 different relationships. Nobody can really have that many. Not good ones. Absolutely not good ones. There's some research on what's called the Dunbar number, and a biologist, Robin Dunbar, looked at the effective size of primates, and then extended that work from chimpanzees and gorillas and other monkeys to humans, and he came up with the conclusion that the effective maximum size of a human group is about 150. And then you get increasingly tighter circles, and you get it down to about 15 that you can know really well, and about 5 that can probably be your best friends, and then one primary relationship. And so if you think you can have hundreds of relationships, the human brain isn't built to manage that many relationships. You can't have that many. Yeah. So who are going to be the 15 in your circle? Who are going to be the 5 in your tight circle? Right. Who's going to be the 1 in your primary circle? Yeah. So, and then there, as you have, on the screen, there are unhealthy and toxic relationships. I coined the term a tornado magnet. And a tornado magnet is a person who has a disproportionate number of problems. And wherever they go, problems follow them, and they seem to be created around them. It's not that they intentionally create these problems, though sometimes they do. It's just that their lives are so chaotic that they create chaos wherever they go. And I have a principle. If you're not related to me by blood or marriage, and you're a tornado magnet, you don't get to be in my life. And even if you are related to me by blood or marriage, then I severely limit your time in my life, because those people will suck so much life out of you, and it steals that time and it steals that attention from all the other important people in your life. So figuring out who are the people where we have parity in our relationship. And when I mean parity, I mean emotional parity. I give and I receive. Mm-hmm. There are some relationships where I give and I don't receive.
And then you give.
Yeah, I give and give and give. And so human beings are built, strong relationships among humans are built on emotional parity. I give, you give back. I give, you give back. And good, healthy relationships build on that emotional parity. if you have people in your circle where you don't have parity, where you're constantly giving, that's not a sustainable relationship.
Yeah. Sorry, I
So,
noticed the misspelling. Had to fix it.
oh, okay. So I would encourage people. Some people call what I call tornado magnets. They call emotional vampires. That they suck the relationship energy out of you. And for me, tornado magnets are people who attract chaos. They attract disaster,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody knows who they are.
Yeah.
Everybody, as soon as I introduce this term, tornado magnet, people go. They look up and they go, "Oh
Names
yeah,
start popping up in their head. Yep.
right." And we all have those people, and heaven help you if you're a tornado magnet. You probably want to go talk to somebody how to reduce the chaos in your life.
Yeah.
But not me. That's not what I do.
Not offering help here.
No, I'm just naming it. Someone with more patience than me should work with you.
Yeah.
And the reason is I've already got the people in my life that I want to invest in, and I don't want to invest in somebody I don't know to help them not be a tornado magnet. If someone else has got that bandwidth, great.
Go for it.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess one thing I'd like to maybe add or question here is just so that people don't mishear us. I think there's been a shift, at least on perceived shift in my world, that people are being taught to completely discontinue, to abandon, to completely like sever relationships with blood, relatives, family, at kind of the drop of the hat. If you see unhealthy or toxic people, just write them off, and that's not what we're saying.
I would make sure we have the definition of toxic pretty well defined, because people that you get irritated with, people who are in your family who you have misunderstandings with, that doesn't mean they're toxic. That means you have misunderstandings with. And you know what? Even if you do have regular conflict with that person, if it is a blood relative who's a tornado magnet, okay, that's kind of your lot in life. Figure it out. Work with them.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go with that.
Yeah.
And they might be in your life for a reason, so that you can be, you can grow, you can be challenged in certain things, that because you're going to run across other
that's
people.
certainly a charitable way to construct it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can get that from it, and I hope you do. Whatever adversity strikes you is bitter or better. But I think you raise a good point, Jared, and I'm really glad you brought it up. There has become, probably in the last 5 years, a therapeutic fad of telling people, oh, if that person is not healthy, just get them out of your life. Okay. How do you define not healthy? How do you define toxic? And so I think people start to paint with a very broad brush about what's unhealthy or what's toxic. And if you don't like how you feel around that other person, that's inside of you. Now you can tell that other person, here's behavior that I'd like you to change. But if your measure is how you feel internally, I feel bad, therefore you're toxic, that you got to have more behavioral descriptions.
Yeah.
If I'm constantly bailing you out of jail, yeah. I mean, that's behavior. I can say, boy, yeah, I love you, but I'm not bailing you out of jail anymore. But just to say, I feel bad, therefore you're toxic, that math doesn't work.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure that we did not feed into that fad, because I think there's a lot of unhealthy, severance of family members because they immediately chalk them up to that. And I love your perspective on that just because you feel a way doesn't mean that they're toxic. It just means you're wanting to avoid confrontation or whatever. And we've talked in other episodes that sometimes is growth. Figure out how to work with those types of people, because you're going to run into those types of people.
Yeah,
to some degree.
And I'll riff on this piece just a little bit more. I come from a Christian tradition, and I really do believe honor your father and mother really matters. And unless you've got a parent who's an active criminal or an active, abuser, either physical or sexual abuser, um, honoring your parent is important, not just for your parent, but for you. And if you dishonor your parents, um, that will have consequences on you and generations to come. Uh, as a person whose parents have passed away, there's not a day that goes by and I had great parents. There's not a day that goes by that I don't wish they were here. So, and once it's gone, they're gone. You don't get a chance to find out more about family history. You don't get to find out about anything else, and you don't get the benefit of their wisdom. So I'd really strongly encourage people to try to honor your parents.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad we covered that topic because I don't want people to mishear us and start severing relationships unnecessarily.
And I appreciate that clarification. I'm just talking about the average sort of person who's in your life who's kind of who's a chaos creator and a tornado magnet. I mean, I just don't have time for that because there are people I love that I'd rather spend time with than fix someone unrelated to me to fix their problems.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking, the buddy that calls you every couple of days to ask you to go to the bar and leave your wife and kids at home. That's kind
Well,
of
so yeah, and whatever is happening at the bar is not productive. If it was productive and redemptive in some way, then sure. But if it's not, and you're just going to chase skirts or to watch football and be stupid. And there's nothing wrong with watching football, but if it's not making you better, is it really a productive use of your time?
Yeah, so I think to kind of summarize the relationships is to analyze what relationships you have, where they fit in the grand scheme of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and in a healthy manner, determine how you're going to proceed with those relationships. Do I have too many? Do I not have enough? And of the ones that I have, do they, are they family? Do they, anyway, I just think that's a great exercise to go through.
Yes.
And a difficult
Yes.
one.
It is difficult, to realize, okay, this is not a person who's good for me, or doesn't bring out my best. Yeah, I should probably not be around that person. When I was a teenager, there was a person I knew, and that every time I was around her, I would make fun of her. I mean, she's just such an easy target, and I was constantly making fun of her. And at some point, I realized, gosh, you're an awful person around her, and it wasn't her fault. I mean, she's just sort of hapless and silly, and I was not hapless or silly, and I was kind of mean about it. And so I decided I'm going to intentionally stay away from her because the way I interact with her is not healthy. It's not good for her. It's not good for me.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen her since, and I hope she's got a wonderful, happy life. But you have to realize, do people bring out in you better qualities or worse qualities? And then you have to look at whose fault is that. With this young lady, it was all my fault.
Yeah.
But I realized, okay, I didn't have at the time the self-control not to be such a smart aleck and nasty to her, so I removed myself.
Yeah. Well, that is in part why I put the non-encouraging side of it in
Right.
there. Are these people encouraging you to be a better version of yourself, right? Isn't that what we talk about? Is like let's
Right.
grow, let's expand who we are, let's become better people. And some people are tearing you down, or you're tearing yourself down because you behave the way you do around that person, to your point. So have that analysis and calculate what, is this a good relationship to maintain or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're going to
And
maintain it, to what degree, right? Your wife and your
exactly.
kids deserve more of your time, and it's not, hey, I'm going to hurry up and slide in an hour because I'm going to go spend a bunch of money at the
Chuck E.
movies.
Cheese. Yeah.
Whatever it is. Like I
Yeah.
love your point. That's not it's
It's not quality
quantity
time,
is
it's quantity time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So becoming more attentive to your internal state, how you feel, how you're thinking, what you're thinking when you're around a person will help you determine, is this a positive building relationship, or is it is it a discouraging, destructive, or I mean, also in there is it a stagnant relationship?
Mm, yeah. Ouch. And why?
And why? It's fun to blame other people. Every bad relationship I've been in, you know what the common denominator is?
You.
Me. So, I mean, I have to look at, and the same is true for everybody. It's like, oh, I've had, a couple bad relationships. Okay, well, they're not in your life anymore. Figure it out. Figure out
Yeah.
what's your part in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be who you're picking to have a relationship with, or how you behave within that relationship, or a combination of the two. But yeah,
Yeah.
figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about time, right? Because your
Hmm.
point is very well taken, and super important that you don't get any of that back, right? If you what's the what's the kind of the scenario that's described today is like, hey, if I gave you a winning lottery ticket for $50 million, would you take it? But you wouldn't wake up tomorrow.
Then why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like so no, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't take the lottery ticket. I'd want to wake up tomorrow. So clearly, your life is worth more than $50 million.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, it's a great example. Yeah.
So anyway, and I think kind of, and I don't do this the best. Clearly, I'm going to fall into a lot of these categories: distractions, inefficiencies, things like that. But
Hmm.
I think to have that perspective that every moment you let go, you don't get back.
No, you don't. You don't.
So
The question then becomes, how do you live more fully in the time that you have?
hmm
And I'll clarify, and much like the great clarification you made in the relationships, is that there is a time and a place for distraction. That there is. I mean,
rest and
entertainment.
relaxation, yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say distraction isn't always in the rest category, but it's certainly in the relaxation and entertainment category, and that's a necessary part of life. And so, don't I hope nobody hears me saying that you have to be some sort of productive machine your
Right.
whole life. I mean, that's not a livable life. So some time for distraction is good. The question then becomes, is your life filled with so many distractions that you don't spend any time in productive activity? Then you got an issue. Then
Yeah.
it's worth looking at.
It occurred to me, it popped into my head, and hopefully it's a good example, but kind of a common distraction these days, or could be a common distraction these days, is gaming. Just as example, I'm not going to poo-poo gaming per se, but I think your
Yeah.
point is, hey, if you want to rest and relax and just kind of hang out, that's reasonable and acceptable. But once it reaches a certain threshold, it becomes a distraction on your relationships, on your productive time, on being healthy or
Yeah.
whatever.
So when my kids were younger and were involved in gaming, um, and I've done. It's been years ago now, so things have changed since then, as from what I understand. But when me and my kids were gaming, we had a rule in the house that you could play video games anytime you wanted under two conditions. Number one, all your homework was done, and number two, it was dark outside.
Mm.
Now, think this through. If your homework was done and it was dark outside on a weeknight, it's probably after 9 o'clock at night. You're going to go to bed here pretty soon.
hmm
Okay, fine. You can play for an hour. On the weekends, you can't play video games until it's dark outside. So on Saturday night, okay, fine. Sunday night, fine. But you can't do it during the day. You can't spend your whole day. Now, what happens in the summer?
You're
It
gaming a
gets
lot
dark
less.
really it
Yeah.
gets dark really late. So
Yeah.
you have to be doing something until it's dark. Okay, then you can play. Sure. You want to play video games after 10 in the summer? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And now I'm not saying that those rules will work for everyone,
I
but
like it.
what it did was it created limits on gaming. It's like play anytime you want under these two conditions.
Yeah.
And as adults, my kids occasionally will play games, but it's not the center of their world because it couldn't become the center of their world.
Right. Right. They didn't build up a habit of, hey, I'll go binge 6, 7, 8 hours, you know.
No, I mean, they did, right? When they'd have friends over on a
Hmm.
Friday night and they'd binge for 6 hours, okay. But then the next day when it was light, they had to get up, they had to do their thing, and they weren't gaming then.
Nice. Yeah. I like it. I like it. I put the third item here, sprint or marathon, and I just wanted a note in there to talk about, if you're investing your time, you've commented in other episodes just briefly on what's my approach to what I'm doing. Is it a short-term objective or is it a long-term objective? And you just have to be honest with yourself,
Yep.
realistic, because I think those can get either uh, confused or not analyzed at all. And I think most people should be looking at it from a marathon approach, but in reality, they're sprinting and they're going to get exhausted.
Well, what happens is when people they think I got to get motivated, I got to change things. And I'll go back to what one of my professors said to me early on with a client. I had this treatment plan for her that I was going to get all this stuff done in 8 weeks. I'll give you the edited version for public consumption, but he said, Roger, it took her 18 years to get screwed up. Don't think you can fix her in 8 weeks. And so I think people, when they have an epiphany about, oh, I got to change this thing about my life, they act like it's a sprint. I'm 50 pounds overweight. I got to lose weight. Well, how
In
long did it
three
take you to
months.
get?
Yeah.
Yeah, in 3 months. Yeah, well, how long did it take you to get there? Like 6 years. Oh, okay, well then maybe you should think about losing weight over the course of the next 6 years. Maybe faster, but that's the marathon approach. And what I have found is that small changes over time and over distance will lead to big changes in results. And so I'll use the example, when I was a kid, I like all target sports. And when I was a kid, I was an archer,
Mm.
still have my first bow, and I would be out in the backyard shooting at a bale of hay with a target on it for hours until my my arm would start getting slapped too much from the bowstring, and my shoulder would hurt, and I would just keep shooting. And what I learned is that if I move just a millimeter where I'm aiming, if you extend that through to the target, which is a long way away, that millimeter at the bow could be a foot.
Yeah.
And so a tiny little change now, given time and distance, will make a big change later. And
Love
so
it.
I've encouraged people, just make the little change now, make the little habit now, and eventually over time and through distance, you'll see a fundamentally different change.
Yeah. Well,
So
you don't get so discouraged when you think, hey, I've got to lose that 50 pounds in months, not years. And, it's not happening immediately. And then you kind of give up and now you're 60
what
pounds heavier, 70 pounds
right,
heavier.
and you start telling yourself these really horrible things like I'm a loser and I'm a fatty, or whatever it is, all of the things that'll discourage you from getting healthy. So again, make a tiny change now, continue with that change, and watch over time how it blossoms and flourishes into something really, really fantastic.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. The other one I wanted to talk about is the inefficiencies. Like, get rid of your inefficiencies, right? We've talked about habit stacking briefly in the past, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that one's super powerful. If you have a habit, if you can be efficient with your time, like I've got a renewed appreciation for walking,
Mm-hmm.
but also I'm trying to read books and get work done and stuff like that. Well, I can do that stuff while I'm walking.
Right. So if you're out for a walk, you can get an audio book. You can listen to a podcast that will change the way you think while you're out walking. But I think there's a lot to be said for walking in quiet as well. So,
Hmm.
so you're going to have different purposes for those different walks, but all of which will build you up. Um, and I'm not opposed to listening to music, but it's amazing to me how much I have learned when I reduced my listening to music in the car and switched over to listening to books, listening to educational things. Right now it's podcasting. When I started doing this, that didn't exist.
Right.
I was listening to cassettes, and then moved over to CDs and was delighted when it all went online. So you can really change your life by changing your thinking, by stacking those things. And people go, "Oh, well, my commute's only 20 minutes." Okay, let's think about that. Let's say a book is 10 hours long. So let's divide that up. You drive to work for 20 minutes, you drive back. That's 40 minutes. That means 15 trips to work,
You got a book.
approximately.
Yeah.
So 15 days, that's 3 work weeks, right? 5 days a week, 15. So in 3 weeks, you can have consumed a book that could change your life.
Yeah.
Oh, it just doesn't seem like it's worth it. Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing, I love all that, by the way, but one thing that just popped into my head that I wanted to run by you that I'm hopeful hopeful that it's helpful to the listeners is um, the idea that you should spend as much time on self improvement or development than you do on your job. Have you heard that
If
recommendation
you did,
before?
if you did that, all of your waking hours would be on development.
So, but when you interject habit stacking, if I go, let's,
Oh, so you're doubling up. If I exercise, if I go for a walk, that's exercise. And then if I listen to a book, it's double duty. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a big number, but this is a number that was tossed around by, I don't even remember who it was now, but it was obviously a highly successful person. Otherwise, nobody would listen to it or put him on, on a video. But I thought, I mean, that sounds super aggressive, but I mean, shoot, even half of that, if you work, let's just use round numbers, 40 hours a week, but you plan on doing self-development, self-improvement 20 hours a week, like where would you be in a year? My
Well,
goodness.
so I'll go back to my statement. Start small.
Yeah,
Start small.
yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you get the Jones for self improvement, you'll naturally expand it.
Yeah, you
Um,
get like addicted to it. You're like, this is empowering.
it's really good. You know, I couldn't tell you how many books, hundreds of books I've listened to in the audio version. Almost, I'd say 75 to 80% of them have been of benefit in my life. I'd say 20% have been awful. One of the things I found is sometimes when I feel like I'm just going through the motions of listening to this, like, oh, I gotta listen to this book. No, I don't. I don't have to listen to this book. Not right now. I'm apparently not in the right headspace for it.
Right.
So I think, if I view learning much like a meal, sometimes it's time for dessert. And so I will listen to an escapist novel, a funny, escapist, mystery, whatever,
Hmm.
adventure. And what that does is it's part of my recreation. And then once I've done that for a little bit, I go, okay, that's enough of that. I want to listen to that other thing. And so it's important to pay attention to your stamina for the content. And there are so many what I would consider recreational books that are also going to nourish you. That they're so well written that sometimes fiction can teach you as much as nonfiction.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking, what you were talking about earlier, listening, using our time efficiently on a podcast or an audiobook or what have you. Uh, there are just some times where I do want to listen to just music. I don't,
Sure.
like you said, your headspace just isn't quite there, but I want the feeling, the emotion, the, the pleasure of listening to music. So do that. And that
So
converts
do
to your
that. Yeah.
recreation, right? Your relaxation, I should say.
Right. And none of that is bad. It's a, it's like your menu choices. People think, oh, red meat is bad. Well, maybe for some people it's bad. Maybe too much of it is bad, but no, it's not bad. So it's a matter of, for you, what's the proportion? And the same is true for music, for video games, for listening to educational material or watching educational material. It's all about proportion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, let's move to money. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, we kind of threw this in here at the last minute, so I didn't really get my head around that. But what's your thoughts on subtracting? Is it a focus thing with money? Is it a usage thing? Is it a
Yeah, so it's not subtracting money. It's not saying, I want to have less money. It's about spending less money. So subtracting the things that take your money. And I think one of the inventions that is both good and bad is the subscription model. And the subscription model for services has provided an even draw out of your bank account. So nobody feels like they got hammered too much. But what happens is those subscriptions sort of add up, and they happen outside of your conscious awareness. You're just not paying attention. And so it's a little like, I have a very simplistic view of money. Okay. It's like a bathtub. Okay. You've got money coming in out the faucet, and then you got money going out the drain. And if you've got a small little leak in the drain, eventually the bathtub is going to be empty.
yeah?
And
Fill it faster to keep it.
and you got to fill it faster. You got to have more faucet on. So it's important to make sure the faucet is going, but it's also important that you don't have small leaks going down the drain. And so paying attention to what's coming out of your account from a subscription, what that requires is that you pay attention to your accounts on a regular basis. Business owners tell me all the time, I'm not good with money, so I hand that off to my finance guy, my CFO or my controller. And I said, no. They can do the day-to-day, but the last thing that a business owner should ever give up is the money. They should always be looking, they don't have to write every check. They don't have to sign every check, but they have to look at that on a regular basis. And I've had people say, well, is once a quarter enough? No. How about once a month? Better. but a cadence of looking at the outflows of your money and the inflows of your money on a weekly basis is a great habit. Doesn't have to take very long.
Yeah.
But making sure that you know what's draining out of the bathtub.
Yeah. I love that analogy. It gives you a visual that you can, work to get your head around. And there's all kinds of avenues. Like, people get creative about the best, the easiest way to take your money. Like, right, I kind of joke because now I can put my watch up next to something and it takes it away. And I joke that pretty soon it'll be all like blink and they'll take my money. But things like, and I'm not a gamer, so I'm going to butcher however this works, but I've seen people that, like, you can, it's a free game, but then you can like buy things like,
Hmm.
armor or levels or
Hmm.
whatever. I don't know. They're just, and they already tied it to your account, right? You gave them your
Right.
bank account, and it's just easy to say, I want to buy that, buy that, buy that. So now you're 2 or 3, 4 hours into a game, and you've sucked the, I don't know, tens, hundreds of dollars out of your account.
I,
Or here's another one that you'll appreciate. Like my car, they want me to pay them X dollars a month so that I can access the app, so that I can like remote start my car or remote adjust my windows or check on the locks. And I'm like,
right.
no, you know, it's
But
crazy.
it's only $5.99 a month. I mean,
Right.
see, that's the thing. And so it seems very small,
Yeah.
but it doesn't need it's all a leak in the bathtub. It's a little bit, but you get enough of that on a consistent basis, and it really does add up. So do you really want to be spending, what is that, 60, if it's $5.99, do you really want to be spending um
But $72 a year if you round up by a
72
buck.
bucks a year for that service?
Yeah.
And if you do, if it's worth it to you, rock on, enjoy.
Yeah.
But
Like
but
I
know
can
what
go
that
out and
is.
start my car. I can push the start button.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, to your point, there's just a lot of ways for, I think both you and I have affinity for movies. We love movies. And
Love
now,
movies. Yeah.
they got your credit card on file. They're like, yep, I'll watch that. Blink, and then you look at the end of the month and you're like, whoa,
Yeah. I mean,
3 movies
it's
in a
really
month. And
easy. It's really easy because human beings, when we're actually paying cash for something, we pay far more attention to how much things cost than when we use a credit card. And if you remove it one further, that you're not even engaging with a physical, tangible object
yeah,
for money to go out, it's even easier.
yeah,
So I mean, if I have to pull out, you know, $40 and I get, $3.67 in change, I know how much I spent. But if I give a person the credit card, I don't look at it, and
right.
most people don't. If it doesn't even involve a transaction except a double click on the side of my phone, then it's really easy to spend that money.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad at the technology. I just encourage people to be conscious of how easy it is to subtract money from your accounts.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying in any respect, don't buy those things on the game. Don't get your thing for your car to make it life easier. Don't or discontinue watching movies. We're just saying be aware of what you're doing, because it's easy to
Be,
just kind of
be,
sit there in the background, and that bathtub is, being
the
siphoned
bathtub is
out pretty quick.
draining. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. Well, all good stuff. We've powered right past our half an hour, as we have a tendency to do.
As always.
so let's make sure folks know how to get a hold of you before we wrap things up.
Yeah, so this is my website, drrogerhall.com, drrogerhall.com. If you accidentally type in the name, spell it out, Dr. Roger Hall, it'll bounce you to this one. On it, you'll see the books I have, one that I've got in process right now. So I've got DIY Brain, Staying Happy, Being Productive, Expedition, which should be out in an Amazon-friendly version here pretty soon. I hope to have DIY Leader Brain out in the next year. I have an online course called Freak Out. So if you have trouble with anxiety, if you're freaking out, take the quiz. And give a look at the course. It's 10 hours of information to help people to overcome their anxieties. So I do executive coaching, leadership consultation with high performance individuals and their businesses.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as always, Dr. Hall, we appreciate you jumping on and sharing, your wisdom and your courses. If these folks appreciate getting this valuable information, because you've charged companies for many years over time for this type of information. So we appreciate it, is what we're saying.
Well, I'm glad to share it with people, and I hope it benefits their lives.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. All right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Hall. We'll wish everybody a blessed one. Take care.
All right. Thank you.